Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Teaching Commons blog. This week, I'm very excited to be having a short conversation with Dr. Alice Kim, who's going to be discussing her not-for-profit organization, which focuses on putting teaching and learning research into action. So Alice, I'll let you introduce yourself. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about kind of how you got to where you are and if you have any past connections with York
Yeah,
and the pathway that you took to get to your not-for-profit.
sure. And I just want to say, Brian, thank you so much for having me on this episode of your blog podcast, and it's great to see you again. So I will mention, yes, I started a not-for-profit organization called Teaching and Learning Research in Action, and I'm currently the managing director. Um, a lot of actually my inspiration for starting this organization is actually closely linked to my experiences with York University, where I did or where I held two postdoctoral positions. One actually was with Brian, but I'll start from the beginning. My first postdoctoral position at York was in the psychology department. I was fresh out of grad school, so my master's and my PhD was focused on investigating how we learn, memory processes that support our learning, and particularly the neural or the brain processes that support memory and learning. And so it was in my first postdoctoral position, which was again at the psychology department at York University, where my research became more applied. And I was focusing on how we can use what we learn, or what we know, about how we learn in more applied real world scenarios. So it was amazing. Like, I have to say, I had an amazing experience. I had the opportunity to work with memory impaired populations, workplace, industry partners, basically, to work on integrating cognitive learning principles in workplace training. And also, I was very fortunate to be able to partner with a K through 12 private school, to see how we can benefit their curriculum and learning in school age children. And so I had I was interested in all of these experiences, but I was most drawn to the educational domain. And I have to say, at that time, as a postdoctoral fellow, I was also teaching at York University, and I was interacting with the Teaching Commons, where Brian's at, and where I would eventually do my second postdoc. So I was attending these workshops on instruction, and it was just something that I was really drawn to. So as I mentioned, my second postdoctoral position at York University was actually at the Teaching Commons, where I was really fortunate to meet Brian and all the other folks there. And it was really a neat experience. I will say, the postdoctoral position itself was focused on the scholarship of teaching and learning, and I already had an inkling of experience in this field, but through my postdoc, I was really immersed in the scholarship of teaching and learning, or SOTL. And I think that is when I became really connected with it. I could see my own research skills really being put into action and being used in a really beneficial way, working with colleagues who wanted to improve their teaching practice based on evidence, and my own teaching practice as well. And just, the feedback I was getting from students, it was super rewarding, and yeah, amazing. It was amazing. So that's my connection to York, and it basically leads up to Teaching and Learning Research in Action, the nonprofit.
Awesome, thank you. And just picking up on that, do you want to tell me a little bit about the Teaching, Learning, Research in Action organization?
Yeah.
How the thought process came about, who it's designed for. I understand you have some student partners as well working with you. So maybe if you want to talk
Yeah.
about the role that the students have with this.
Yeah, for sure. So, again, it's, what, so much of my life, my current, where I am, is linked to people I've met at York, experiences I've had at York. It was actually one of my advisors while I was doing my postdoctoral fellowship at the Teaching Commons, who said to me, really casually and like really early on in my position, he was just saying like, you know what, Alice, I think that you will probably have to carve out your own career. Like you're in this juncture where it's kind of like a new space, and you will probably have to pave your own way. And at the time, I didn't really think anything of it. Well, I mean, I thought about it, but not too deeply. But as it turns out, maybe it was like a seed that was planted at the time. But what I did realize, and I think a lot of people already know and appreciate and probably agree, that is that overall, I think that teaching is not recognized enough, like not valued enough. I think it's valued for sure, but I think it should be way more valued. And I think that there should be more spaces and more, let's say, opportunities to be promoting and furthering this field on its own. It's like teaching and learning research as a discipline on its own. And I know that there are many movements and endeavors that have begun to do so and continue to do so, but I think that there's lots of space for more to happen. And so with Teaching and Learning Research in Action, which is the nonprofit organization that I've started, we're focused, like our focus is to both conduct research on teaching and learning, but also to disseminate this information in a public way, so that it's accessible, not only accessible, but also delivered in a way where people really want to engage. So instead of, if you're an instructor and you really have this burning desire to improve your discussion forums, you're highly motivated and you have access to academic research on how to do so. But everyone else, I mean, discussion forums are not the only component of teaching, right? And also teaching doesn't just happen in the classroom. I think that everyone can benefit from knowing or understanding how to learn more effectively, how to teach more effectively. So it's really about disseminating this kind of information that's evidence-based to the public for everyone.
Awesome. And do you want to talk a little bit about the role that your students play within the organization?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have positions called junior researchers, and they are typically filled by students, so people who are still in the process of furthering their education, let's just say, or like you can say student partners. So we do have students involved. We don't really look at, like, I would say we don't really look to them as being students, like they are. I mean, that's a big part of their identity, and it's really helpful for us to have a student perspective on our team as well. But we have a mix. So we have some junior researchers who are still in the process of completing their education. We have individuals who've completed their doctoral training as well. We have I mean, and the thing is that we're very, I would say, interdisciplinary, in the sense that some of our team is, their background and their specialty is media, animations, like audio recordings, like filmmaking. Myself, my formal training is in psychology, and then I have really focused on the teaching and learning component in terms of my research. We have people who have backgrounds in language, like different languages, philosophy as well. To get back to your question, I think we do have like people who are students, but we don't really consider them, or like their main identity is not that they're students. So I think it's more like what skills, what interests they bring to the table when we gather, and we do work in smaller subgroups on specific projects. So I think well, I mean, to answer your question, the students who are involved in our organization, they contribute a lot. And I think that their identity, it's, we've come to have these close relationships that their identity is more beyond than being a student.
That's great. And I'm sure they appreciate too being, treated as not just a student within an organization, but actually having kind of more of a direct role in being able to bring those perspectives that they do have that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Great. And so maybe just kind of one last question or final thoughts. What's kind of your big takeaway that you want people to know about this organization?
That's a really good question. I think the one thing that I'll say is that most of us as educators, we try to teach our students to think critically, to be critical thinkers, to look to facts, to look to evidence and reason, and just to have that approach in their daily lives, like in their studies, whatever you're studying in your daily life, like think, be a thinker, think critically, and I think that it's really important that we adopt that and we model that. And I'm saying in the sense of how we teach, it should also be based on evidence and facts, and my PhD advisor, I mean, I always think about this. He once told me that intuition is your worst enemy. And so we may have into our own intuition about what is the best way to teach. How was I taught? And what worked for me? But I think that we need to move away from that and really do what we are asking our students to do, and to be critical of how we teach, and to base the way we teach, to base it on evidence and studies. And you can't just walk into a classroom and do what you think might be good, like based on what, like you do need some evidence there too. And so that's really at the heart of our mission at Teaching and Learning Research in Action, to make sure that our teaching practice and even our learning, right, the way that we learn, like the way that we try to learn, is based on evidence. There's a better way to do things, and there are people who are researching this. And so I think, we're doing our best to try to make this information available and accessible. And it's not just us. There's a ton of folks who are doing huge things to really disseminate this information in an accessible way. But, Brian, we had this conversation earlier. If you don't want to learn, if you're not in the mindset of wanting to learn, you won't. Like students, we're talking about students, but it's ourselves too. So I would say it's important, I think, that we should all try to keep an open mind in terms of what we do in our own teaching practice, and to have that desire to be continuous learners, lifelong learners ourselves, and take advantage of all the folks, like not just TLR, all the organizations, all the folks who are putting so much effort to make this new research available to you and to everybody.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Alice, for this conversation. And for those listening, you can visit tlraction.com, and there'll also be a link posted at the bottom of this video on our Teaching Commons page and in the comment section of the YouTube posting. So please check out this website. It's a great website, lots of great resources, opportunities to contribute and kind of promote on your own this organization. So please go check that out. And thanks again to my esteemed colleague here, Alice, for joining me, and looking forward to to continuing these blog post conversations down the road.
Thank you so much, Brian.